Hello and welcome to the Mystic Chat. And today we are going to be talking about magical books, books of shadows, grimoires, and all of those things. And you may be thinking, well, yeah, magical book sounds kind of boring. No, yeah, because we're not just talking about a book you open up and recite a spell. We're going to be uh, going a little bit or a lot deeper than that, depending upon what's happening. So, my name is Chris. I am a published author, and I am an ordained minister with the Fellowship of the Phoenix and an overall trouble maker. And hopefully, we'll get into a little bit of trouble on today's show. I would like to introduce my co host, Laura Gonzalez. Laura, introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Laura Gonzalez. I'm a priestess of the goddess. I'm a minister with Circle Sanctuary. I am a podcaster. I am a healer. I am a witch for hire. Pew, pew. And I am also a certified troublemaker. And I also do these videos. So welcome to Mystic Chat. And I would like to introduce our other co-host, Ruby Rose.
Hello, thank you so much. I am Ruby Ruse. I am a YouTube artist. My channel is called Fairy Fortune, so I do hope you'll check me out on YouTube. I am also a professional fortune teller. I usually do festival settings, and my cat just joined us. She was going to be on the show. And I lost my train of thought. I would not say that I'm a troublemaker, unfortunately. I do try to negotiate the trouble, but it tends to find me. So there we have with that. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our final co-host, Luke Babb.
Hey, everybody. My name's Luke. I use they, them pronouns. I am a eclectic polytheist, sort of jack of all trades magically. You might have heard of me from The Wild Hunt, where I've got a monthly column. I mostly work with the Hellenic and Norse pantheons, but you know, tricksters, we get around. I'm actually really excited about the topic today, because books of shadows, books of spells, this is the stuff that you grow up with, right? Like I grew up with this image of like the magic caster with the giant tome of knowledge, right? And I think the first book I ever bought that was like about magic in any way was a book about grimoires, the like really old magical tradition. But I feel like a lot of people here have more experience than I do in this topic. Chris, what brought you to think about this as our topic for today?
Well, this wasn't my idea. I don't know whose idea. It was either Ruby's. It was Ruby's idea. But one of the things that I think is interesting about magical books is that yes, we write down our thoughts, our spells, our, our, our journeys. And if you've ever taken a class with me, one of the things I always say, journal your experience. And that becomes a magical book. But there are magical tomes and things like that, the goetia, the key of Solomon, voodoo, with the sigils and runes and all types of things. Ruby, tell us about why you wanted to talk about this.
Well, it's probably not the answer that you're expecting.
It never is.
I failed to mention that the Fairy Fortunes YouTube channel focuses on fairy folklore and modern fairy faith spirituality, and also fairy themed events. And in that vein, May 1st, in addition to being Beltane, is Mother Goose Day.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. It's Mother Goose Day. And I was thinking about that, and I had an experience actually in the very recent past where I was learning about famtrads, which is basically is sometimes ceremonial magic, but usually like a traditional magic, a tradcraft tradition that is more less ceremony and more chaos magic a little bit, focuses on family charms and things like this. And so when I was reading about this very fascinating idea of famtrads, I realized that I came from a famtrad. Well, I wouldn't say I came from a famtrad. What I usually say is I came from what I think is the remnants of a famtrad. I think that my family were like wise women and cunning men. Because we have their psychic ability tends to run in my family, whatever you think the psychic ability is. And we're sorcerers, and that we can speak to the spirits of the dead, spirits of other worlds, that kind of thing. So in that vein, one of the things that my teacher, my family teacher, my Aunt Maddie did was she was always quoting Mother Goose. And when I was thinking about Mother Goose Day and grimoires and that kind of thing, I was like, oh my goodness, Mother Goose was my family's grimoire. And that's the reason I wanted to talk about this subject today, because of Mother Goose.
So I want to talk about that for a second, because you're right. Mother Goose, so says the mythology, the lore, the folklore is that, first of all, in Germanic and heathen traditional witchcraft, our main goddess is Frau. Other people call her Mother Goose.
Mother
Probably
Goose.
because she has a sacred goose, and whenever how I was trained, this may be a little bit different than the heathen lore is that whenever you hear a flock of geese flying overhead, that's actually for Holda soaring across the winter skies and things. And so says the legend that the book is actually a book of spells, which I was thinking, Humpty Dumpty is a curse. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So that's a curse right there. And is that true? Did a bunch of witches get together and create nursery rhymes? I'm not sure. I'm sure it actually happened, but it's a great fun to take nursery rhymes and you make healing spells and love spells and hexes and everything else.
Yeah, I think it's also so I come at this from the other direction, right? Like I come at it because of what little background I have in folklore and knowing how myths get turned into fairy tales, get turned into nursery rhymes, right? So when I read something like Mother Goose, sure, but moreover for me, Grimm's fairy tales.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
When I read Grimm's fairy tales, part of me is reading for like, what's it telling us about the time that it was written, right? But a lot of it is me knowing that these two guys went out into the forest and brought back the stories that they found there, that had been handed down voice to voice to voice to voice for hundreds of years. And we know that they cleaned them up. We know that they made them a lot less weird and a lot more palatable. That is how these things tend to work. But even so, by modern sensibilities, when you read Grimm's fairy tales, it's some dark stuff, right? And
the originals are pretty intense.
The originals are very intense. And there are in heathen stuff specifically, some of the folk tales and fairy tales that come down, we can see myths that we know in translation, right? Like you can find a big angry guy carrying a hammer who fights with a troll, goes by another name, but is definitely Thor in the mountains hundreds of years after Old Norse practice has died out. So for me, when we look at, and I love this because I love folk tales and fairy tales because of this. When we look at those, I often am like not thinking about how I can look at them, learn a little bit more about where they might have come from, and then what it tells me about my practice.
And I find it fascinating that you pointed out, look, and yes, all these folk tales and grim tales and all these tales, they are on every culture, because when you see the ruby red slippers or the red slippers or the red shoes, and then you hear the story of La Llorona, you know, the weeping woman in the Mexican folklore, the anecdote talks about the same thing, like, don't go out with strangers, be careful what your desires are telling you about, and be cautious, right? Like, and it's a rite of passage, and it's a rite of the blood, and it's a rite of becoming an adult, and you know, all the dangers that are there for women in the world, for bleeding people in the world. And you find those tales on every culture, and even though they're called something different. And to hear y'all talk about like all these tales and how they're ancient and they're in the books, and then thinking how in America, very few of them, in America, as in America, the continent, few of them are written, and the majority of them are just word of mouth. And that is because our cultures in America are used to do that. It's just word of mouth. The memory of the colonizers destroying every record of everything is still very fresh. So the only thing that we try to conserve and preserve is word of mouth. And then the most known one that has already been sometimes honored and sometimes appropriated by Hollywood is La Llorona. Like, everybody knows the weeping woman, and it is already, you know, being enriching people's culture, but it's still past word of mouth, and nobody knows the right origin. So you have old Mexican people saying like, no, but the true story is this one, and no, but the true story is that one. No, but what really happened was blah, 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 because there is no record. There is nothing written on how it all got started. But we all know that as children, because that's what the tales, most of the tales were for, as children, you will never be out after midnight, because what she wails, what she screams is, where are my children? So if you're a child and you're outside at night in the dark, she'll come and she'll take you. So you know, as a child, once it's dark, you better be home, or else La Llorona is gonna come and get you.
That's so funny. So along with this storytelling, I want to kind of segue. We can come back and forth if we need to. I want to segue into magical books like Grimoires and books of shadows and things. And for those of you who are like, what's the difference? Grimoire is just another fancy name of saying a magical book. However, what we like to say now is a grimoire is more like ceremonial magic. Think the Key of Solomon, goetia, things like that. And the Book of Shadows, as we know, it comes from Gardnerian Wicca. And I remember learning about it and thinking, ooh, I like the name Book of Shadows. That's cool. And then I saw a Book of Shadows. I'm like, I don't see raising the dead anywhere in here. Oh, Samhain. Okay, there it is. There it is. But you know, for So the Grimoires, what we think of the Key of Solomon and things like that, they date to roughly like the Renaissance and things like that. And it's interesting because a lot of them are bastardized versions of pagan gods. And so when you're taught the goetia by a pagan, how they rectify it is very interesting. The first time you call them by the name in the book, like, so for example, Belial. When you call him, but he's actually a demonization of Baal. So you do the chants, you do the conjurations, blah blah blah. It sounds like blah 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 actually, and then you see him in his demon form, or as we say, his like his a cloak, his facade, but then he reveals himself as his Baal, and then you only call him by his pagan title from then on out. And then I remember saying, well, that's kind of a around the corner way to do it. Well, why don't we just call Baal and call it a day? Interesting thing is, again, this is how I was trained from like ceremonial, magical, pagan, blah, 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 is that one of the reasons we would call the demon form of Baal, Belial, is because, and you're going to enjoy this, every spiritual being has a shadow, has a vice, and what you're calling is that darker, shadowy aspect of the deity who is going to teach you valuable learnings, lessons, wisdom, so have you, but in a way that's a little bit more, let's just say, not so nice. I was always taught you only conjure a demon as your very last resort. So like, say for example, you need to pay your rent. You ask your ancestors, they didn't help you. You asked your gods, they didn't help you. Well, I need to pay the rent or else I'm gonna be homeless, so I'm gonna conjure a demon. Blah, blah, blah. So,
Did you look for a job before you called
oh
the
no,
ancestors or after?
I have
Come on, Lord.
never,
Come on.
so I have never used, ceremonial magicians don't really call them demons. We just call them chthonic spirits. But I have never used one for like practical purposes. I've always used it for like expand your psychic awareness and things like that. I would never say, hey, ancient spirit, go get me a car. No, because I don't want the car to crash. To be honest, it's really not that scary. It sounds scary, but it's really not. Again, it depends upon who your teachers are. How I was taught was the really another purpose of conjuring chthonic, ancient, chaotic spirits is it really teaches you how to control your own powers and your own magic and your own ability, because just to memorize all the conjurations is a bitch. It's not easy. And then you have to learn to control your own psychic powers first. That's part of the tradition. Then you learn how to control the energies around you. Then you're allowed to conjure the spirit. So it's more of an exercise in control and expanding your psychic facilities. So are they used to get jobs? I'm sure they are. I can't, like, someone's like, I want that job at McDonald's. I joke, but Laura, you're shaking your head. Tell me.
No, I don't. I shook my head at the job of McDonald's because I despise McDonald's with all my.
So, I
I
mean,
yeah.
it sounds like in the case of grimoires, then writing this down is part of like a really complicated technology, right? And I'm using technology
Absolutely.
in that like old sense of like, this is a really intense series of things you got to do
Yes.
correctly to make a
Yes.
thing go off.
Yes. So in the key of Solomon, and the key of Solomon is the opposite. It's
Isn't it like a phone book, essentially? Just like, here's all of the gods you can call.
what isn't gods is planetary and angelic beings. And think of it this way. Again, other teachers may have their own way of thinking about it. It's kind of like the sigils, the pictures are a signature to a very specific energy. So, like, for example, if I want to really say I'm not that good at scrying or having psychic premonitions, but there is an angel who can help me really enhance that skill. So I would do a lunar angel, and there's about 10 of them that you can use. You read the description and see which ones is the best one for you. And then you do the conjurations. But then, especially in the case of angels, they become a spirit teacher, not a spirit guide, a spirit teacher, to where you're like, hey, I really need your help to learning how to scry or say psychometry or whatever. I'm not so good. Can you teach me? And then you have a relationship with it. So the difference between working with the angels, it becomes a reciprocal um, relationship, and you do give them offerings. Absolutely, just like any other spirit. The chthonic spirits, not so much. You don't give them offerings. You can. It always cracks me up because in the Grimoire it says, if you're going to work with Belial, he mandates you have to give him a sacrifice. And then there's a star that says, do not give him a sacrifice. It's like, just so he'll tell you, but don't do it. How I say as a witch, especially a nature shaman, all about the universe witch, if you have a relationship with the spirit and you have control of your own faculties, if you feel the need to give an offering to any spirit, as long as it's ethical to you, I say do it. So, for example, if you're working with the spirit and it says, hey, I'm happy to help you become more psychic. I'm just going to stay with that one. But I need energy too. So I need an offering of honey and bread. I think that's okay. If he says, I need you to go and harm, an animal. No, that's not okay to me. It's all in nature is sacred. And, that being said, I do have to say, if any spirit says to do something that you don't think is ethical, there's two things that you can do. The first thing it says, nope, I can do some apples and some wonderful oranges, or I won't work with you at all. That's your two choices. To just said, but tell them what you can do. Your choice number two is don't work with that spirit.
So Jessica in the audience, sorry, Laura,
Oh,
do you want to go first?
no. I want you to read the question and then I want to answer.
Yeah. So Jessica in the audience has this really great question, which I think is really talking about when we're talking about especially chthonic spirits, as you're using it, Chris. As a beginner in understanding psychic power, how do you determine negative thoughts versus knowing if something's speaking to you?
Mm.
So
I
how do
got
you know if it's coming from inside or outside the house?
I know this one. I know this one. As a psychic person who was born with these abilities, I was blessed not having to learn how to be a psychic, but just be one. By the way, I think you can be either or. Is one of those like, are you born or do you learn it? And the answer is yes.
I think it's a birthright.
I'm sorry?
I think it's a birthright. I think everybody has it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like a muscle. Some people need to exercise a lot to work that muscle, and some people just have a natural ability, in my opinion. And so I think, Jessica, that what happens to me is the more bizarre the thought, the less sense that it makes, the more unlikely for it to happen. That is a spirit, or a spirit within me, or the goddess or whatever talking to me. But when it actually makes sense and it sounds too good to be truth, I'm just imagining things, and I don't think that's
See,
your psychic
I
ability.
see what you're saying, but I hear,
Can I finish?
I think that magic is imagination. Like, you have to use imagination in order to harness magic. And if you think about it, anything that a person wants to design, anything that a person wants to manifest has to be imagined first. The cell phone had to be in somebody's mind before it was created. It was actually Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek. That's why we have cell phones, is Star Trek. That's why we have cell phones. So you have to be able to imagine it. So if it's an intense thought and it makes you stop and think, then does it honestly matter if it's an entity or your imagination? Like, doesn't matter. It's still magic. So if it's important and you think it's an entity, it might be an entity. It might not, but in the long run, doesn't matter.
I have so many thoughts about that, but Laura, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was trying to convey an idea, and let me finish. That's how I know me, Laura Gonzalez. That's how I know who is talking. Kind of like if the call is coming from my logic side or my spirit intellectual, spirit creative side. I pinpointed that at a very young age, and I'm right now I'm very able to just differentiate between one and the other. The idea, telling you my example, was pay attention to how the message comes to you and when it is or not a psychic message. And then pay attention to what happened before, what happened during, what happened after. And then you will get your own clues about how your own deity, entity, imagination, or whatever you call it or want to call it, speaks to you directly. I don't think is not a cookie cutter. Not everybody's experience is going to be the same. And with that, I'm finished.
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think it's such a complex question. Two quotes that come up for me here, right? The first one is Oracle at Delphi, just know thyself, right? If you know who you are, right? You know what your thoughts sound like. But for me, what's really important here is, like, especially when you're doing discernment about, is this a bad thing from outside of me, or am I just in a mood right now, right? What's really important there is knowing your values, right? What values do I live by? What things are really important to me to enact in the world? And is this thought in alignment with those values? Because, and there are a lot of really good authors who talk about, who experience mental illness and talk about the difference between intrusive thoughts and God communication or deity communication, because I think it is really important to know when you are experiencing what kind of thing. I also think you're right, Ruby. I think that Patrick Dunn actually has a great line about the imagination is the sense organ of the soul, which I think is beautiful. And a lot of my experiences, like with the gods, start out as a form of imagination. But for me, it's important to keep in mind that like spirits outside of me can like influence my imagination and like influence my thoughts, just like my friends do, just like conversations like this do. And it's always really important to me to like bring myself back to that sense of my values, right? If I'm like having an experience and like having a good thought, and I eventually find myself being like, you know what, maybe murder's not that bad really after all. Like something has gone wrong. So like something somewhere is like not in alignment with my values, because murder is not one of my values, right? And I need to find like, am I having like an intrusive thought? Am I having an influence on me? Like, is there something that I need to like push away from? Am I going too far down a dark path? Like, how can I find myself in myself in this moment?
The other thing I think we need to realize is that those are human emotions too. Like, people can make us so angry that we have a fleeting thought of murder. Like, we do that. That's normal. And so I don't think, the other thing is, we're kind of going off topic here, but I mean,
Shocking.
negative thoughts though, I just want to make it clear that an entity cannot make you do anything, like Luke was saying, that doesn't align with your values. You just take a moment and say, okay, that's a thought. It might be mine. It might be somebody else's, but that is not who I want to be. That is
Right.
values. So you can evaluate any thought you have. But to go back on topic, what I'd really like to know is, I'd like to hear if anyone on the panel actually keeps what they think is a book of shadows or a grimoire of their own.
I have several. I have lots of journals, and to be honest, I've journaled so much that I actually have taken a break from journaling, because I don't have a book. I have the years. Like, these are all the years I've done it, so I've taken a break. But I have a special book that anytime I learn something extraordinary, or something that's I was taught to in a dream, or by another practitioner, that really stands out, I have that. So I know who Laura has a book of shadows. I'm sure she has several, and I know she's dying to share with us. So I want to see. Show us what you got. Show us.
I am the least crafty, witchy craft person in the world, and that's why I'm laughing my butt off. Because I know people who are very artistic, and they're very like, oh my god, unicorns and rainbows and this and that, and I admire the craft and the time and the effort and the artistry that goes into some of these books. So I am here laughing my butt off because somebody did a drawing that's supposed to be me.
I love it.
And I say supposed to be me because this is a person who is clearly not my size, but it was a gift, and I really, really appreciate it. And I just put it on the binder, and I just have a binder where some dividers color coded for the elements, and basically me showing you this. Oh, I'm trying here. I'm trying. It just has air, earth, fire, water, and I want to encourage people who are not artistic or crafty like me to do you, boo. Just do what you do and keep your record the best that you can. And I'm saying this because sometimes new people who are new to the craft, it's almost like made believe that it's a requirement that you have to have this like super elaborated book of shadows, and that you draw on it and put your blood and put a eyelash and
Your blood.
this and that. And I don't think that is necessary. I think that whatever comes from your heart, and of course I have here all the teachings from my some of my former mentors, the actual pieces of paper that were either written or printed from the teachings of my former mentors. And I have several. I go to binders because I'm very like, I love technology, and my book of shadows is full of technology. So I just print stuff and I put the holes on it and put it on the binder. So this is the book of shadows where when I teach, this is my oils and creams and stuff that I do magical, the Blue Witch products, everything is here. And I also have other, what is it called? Like a diary type of thing. I mean, you all know which name brand is this, and this is the one that I use, but they're not paying us, so I'm gonna take it. This is my emotional book of shadows. Nothing goes on here other than my emotions. I felt happy today. I felt embarrassed. I feel, and then the reason why. And this is something that I read from an incredibly amazing book by my dear, dear friend, Monica Gobin. It's called Dancing the Mandala of Your Moons. And she approaches astronomy from a goddess point of view in a very feminine way, and recommends to do this exercise of writing your emotions. And I picked this habit like 2 years ago, and it has been a very good exercise. Not to go back and learn, which ideally that should be the point, but it's a friend to talk to, it's somebody to tell them like, hey, I felt like crap today because blah, blah, or I felt very happy. And then I have my other book, which is, I love Jack Skellington, by the way. So everything has Jack, or I have other too, but these are just other books that are just books where I write other things. But this one is where I write my daily activities, because circumcisory ministers have to have a yearly report thing, and you forget what you did yesterday or the day before. So I just write everything. Like, I saw this many clients, I taught a class, like Mystic Chat will be written in today, like I did Mystic Chat and stuff like that. But the biggest book of shadows that I have is this. It's all my podcasts, all my shows, all my little the coffee break videos and all the stuff that I do electronically. And sometimes I forget, what did I say? How did I say it? When was it? Or who told me this? Who told me that? And I literally go and Google like Lunatic Mondays, Chris Allen. Okay, this is a show where he said da 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 da. And then I will write it on a piece of paper and then poke holes in it, and it goes in the Book of Shadows. So mainly I'm showing you my very not artistic Book of Shadows. So you get inspired to do anything above this is art, and do your thing and be happy while you do it and have fun. That's the main thing, is have fun with your witchcraft.
One of the things that I kind of want to talk about is the secrecy and things like that, because like there was a time about 20 years ago where all these like authors from the 70s and 80s and even 60s, and after they died, their Book of Shadows was being published. So Lady Shiva, who else? Gerald Gardner and so forth. And one of the first things that people would say who actually physically saw the actual Book of Shadows goes, oh, it's real thin. It's really thin. Of course it's thin. They're not putting the juicy stuff out there. And so there's a lot of people who, in my magic, I have no secrets at all. I hate gatekeeping. We've had shows about gatekeeping, but I do believe in uh, don't teach a kindergartner college level stuff. Not because of, oh, you have to earn it, but just because they wouldn't even understand it anyway. So I do think that, like, if someone goes, hey, can I thumb through your magical books? Sure, I don't care. We'll go ahead. Some people are really private about it, and sometimes I think it's, um, when you write your private thoughts and your private experiences, those are just yours. Like, for example, if I write in my journals how I saw, for Diana, who is my patron goddess, well, unless she says share this with your friends, it's a very deeply personal thing. But for me, that experience is different than, say, a working or a spell. What do you guys think about secrecy and stuff when it comes
I
to this?
just every so often, like I'm not. I know I got a baby face, but I'm not as young as I look. But every so often, I'm just reminded that I'm really new to the pagan community as these things go. Because you talk about secrecy, and I'm like,
What?
what
What's that?
what's worth keeping secret? Like I will admit that I'm not good at journaling in general. Never have been. I remember being back in grade school, my teacher would be like, take out your notebooks and journal for a while, and I'd be like, I'll write a story. Like I'll do some homework. Uh so I've got some notebooks that I use for various purposes, and I kind of keep some of the ritual scripts that I've worked on or have gone to, but I don't have something that really passes that I would necessarily call a book of shadows, right? And when people talk about like secrecy, like keeping your spells secret, it's wild to me because my understanding of spells is that they're super personal, right? Like, because they're based on how I understand the universe, and that's how things are going to work for me. So if I need to do a money spell and I use like holly and pennies and a specific kind of dirt, I might write that down as like, oh, this was good. I like it. It was nice. I got $10 on the ground later, and I was pleased with that. But I would not expect to be able to hand that to Ruby and be like, Ruby, I have a money spell. You want it? And for her to get anything useful out of it. I would expect her to be like, why on earth did you use dirt from literally the shop and save across the street from you? Why did you do that? Where did you even find dirt in the shop and save? Like,
Sure, it's not hard.
Like that's my understanding, and it wouldn't make much sense for me as I practice to keep my practice secret, because the most I can do is be like, this is what made sense for me.
Right.
But Ruby, I'm assuming that you have a book of shadows of some sort. This was your idea.
It's digital.
Nice.
I have spreadsheets. I have magical spreadsheets. And I have shared my spells. It depends on the circumstances. I'm with you, Luke, is that spells tend to be personal. I think a charm from Mother Goose, those are very nice. They're little blessings, and little protection spells. Like bread and butter is something that my Aunt Maddie used to say. Bread and butter, anytime that you went around a fence, where you couldn't hold hands, you were supposed to say bread and butter so that you wouldn't get into a fight later on, like that, this little blessing that you do. And sneezing, you know, sneeze on Sunday, sneeze for sorrow, sneeze on Tuesday, so your true love tomorrow. Like those are charms and blessings. But a spell, if you really want something, it's really got to be personal. It's hard to take somebody else's words and really get that into your soul. I mean, that is possible. I mean, speaking as a former actor, you know, I became those characters. So I would say it is possible to take somebody else's spell, but I think it's harder because you want the items that you use in the spell to have meaning to you. You want them from the Save-A-Lot to mean something. And, but I have shared my spells on occasions when somebody has a situation that is so akin to my own. And we'll talk about it and I'll say, well, I did write a spell for that. Would you like to see it so that you can maybe alter it for yourself? Like it can be helpful to give somebody inspiration.
Exactly. I was gonna say that exact same thing. Like I teach all the time to my process. Like for example, all my beginner students, I do this tedious thing that they hate. I make them every time they come and see me. I make them write down three magical herbs, three magical stones, and they're like, "Well, I have the book right here," and I'm like, "Nope, you got to write it down." And then they have this collection of like um, crystals, the herbs, trees, colors, and they're writing it down. And I check it, I look at it, and then after some time, I'm like, okay, Nika, you have a basic understanding about spellcraft. They're like, well, what do you mean? Okay, job. What herb? Oh, patchouli. Great. What color candle? Green. Great. What stone? A pyrite. Okay, now, bam. And the thing is that I didn't tell them what to choose. It just whatever either popped in their head or something they enjoyed. Like I love pyrite. It's so pretty. Use that one since it speaks to you. Okay, so here's how you put it all together. Like I'll teach that. Here's how you raise the energy. Here's how you can put it all together. And the other thing I say is, if you don't like how I do things, change it. Change it. Do what speaks to you. If you think screaming at the top of your lungs will help, then do that. If you think quiet contemplation will help, then do that. You know. So yeah, in fact, I make them keep a journal, which I say, okay, this is your very first book of shadows, and they're like, it's just got herbs in it and stones. I'm like, it'll fill up. Trust me, I will make you do lots of stuff.
That's very similar to what I do. I tell them, you know, not the right three things or whatever, but going back to the secrecy. I mean, I teach, so what secrets? You know, there's no secrets. I mean, everything. People who are my students, they have everything that I have here. I don't know if they write word for word, but you know, they have all the content. And it is, I see it more because there is no secret. Every other person, famous person, Book of Shadows has been published, so there is no secrecy anymore, not like it was in the 60s and 70s. But the books have become, in my opinion, more of a reference book. You know, like you write
Yeah.
it down so you, when you forget or you don't have the reference book, like if I need something about crystals, well, I don't write it on my Book of Shadows because I have this Scott Cunningham book and I like that very much and it resonates with me. And same as Ruby was saying, you know, should I share my spells? Well, again, that's my livelihood, that's my job. So yeah, I share the spell. Would it work for the person? Well, I work with the person and then learn from their experience and their need, and then we adjust it as we go. And I
Think too
have,
that
I'm
Book of
sorry?
Shadows can be a record too, because like divination, that doesn't always turn out the way you expect it.
Mm-hmm.
a spell can take on an aspect that you didn't expect.
Kind of like a cooking recipe book, right? The
Yeah.
cooking books now, they have like little lines for notes. So you have this recipe and then you do the spell and it didn't work. So you write your notes like, it didn't work this time because blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'll try with a different moon or something. I think they're more for reference. And I think as we are more modern and more dependent, where we like it or not, of technology, most of us have spreadsheets and stuff that we print and or we just Google it.
Mhm.
There is, it's a romantic memory for yourself, but it's really not,
Mm.
you know.
And I also use spells that worked really well. I use them as templates for other things.
Yeah.
Oh, I did that spell for that vacation and it went exactly as I wanted it to. So what did I do right? How can I replicate that?
I think it's romantic and if that's your thing to do the like super elaborated crafty one, do it and have fun with it. But it's more of a symbolic thing at this point, I think, for people. And each witch has her niche, right? I have a very good memory, so I don't have to write everything down. There are people that they forget what I just said. What did I just said? You forgot? See, that's you. So, then those are the people that need to write everything down and then go modify, stretch, change this and that, and then you have a record of how you did it, how it worked, did it work, or maybe didn't, and then you do something new or different.
So we've come to our hour already. Do you guys have any final thoughts? And then we will stop the show and open it up for questions. Any final thoughts, Luke?
I mean, I think that sort of what I'm hearing from all of us, right? Because I always love to like see the patterns that are coming through as we talk to each other, is to really to, as always, be respectful of your spirits, but to really get to know yourself and to
Yeah.
do the magic that works for you, just in general, whether that's an elaborate journal, because I do know people who have like beautiful handcrafted, like made by themselves, like books that they've bound, whether that's a series of manila envelopes with a bunch of random stuff in it, whether it's a series of binders, which Laura, I also have a shelf of binders, however it is, however it like grows out of your knowledge of yourself and your practice and your relationships. Books of magic can be a lot of different things and used for a lot of different reasons.
Wow, that was an awesome conclusion. I was like, wow, look at you go. All right, thank you for joining us on today's show. Follow us on YouTube and in iTunes and Spotify and all of those things. And we will be back in 2 weeks. So thank you, and we shall see you guys.